For 47 years, the Iranian regime has chanted death to America and waged an unending campaign of bloodshed and mass murder, targeting the United States, our troops, and the innocent people in many, many countries. Iran is the world's #1 state sponsor of terror and just recently killed tens of thousands of its own citizens on the street as they protested.
55 people have now been killed in the U.S. and Israeli strikes.
And we will ensure that Iran does not obtain a nuclear weapon. A very simple message. They will never have a nuclear weapon. May God bless the brave men and women of America's armed forces. May God bless the United States of America. May God bless you all. Thank you.
In the pre-dawn hours of February 28, 2026, as most of the world slept, the skies over Iran lit up. What followed in the next 12 hours would be unlike anything the modern Middle East had ever seen. Nearly 900 strikes. Two of the world's most powerful air forces. One sovereign nation on fire. The supreme leader of Iran, the man who had ruled with absolute authority for 36 years, was dead before noon. This is the story of
Operation Epic Fury! Is that a great name?
how it happened, who made it happen, and what the world has become since.
You know, you never like to say too early you won. We won. We won the bet. In the first hour, it was over.
This was not a raid, not a targeted strike. This was a full-scale joint military campaign, the most consequential use of American force in the Middle East since the 2003 invasion of Iraq. How did two democracies authorize a war of this scale, without a congressional vote, without a UN mandate, and while their diplomats were still shaking hands in Geneva? And what does it mean when the world's most powerful military and its closest ally decide that a nation's leadership must be eliminated and then act on that decision?
This is a decision of real leadership to remove such a threat and enable the world to breathe.
To answer those questions, we have to go back to October 7th, 2023, back to the moment this war was set in motion. October 7th, 2023, Hamas militants launched the deadliest attack on Jewish civilians since the Holocaust, killing over 1,200 Israelis in a single day. Israel responded with a campaign to dismantle Hamas in Gaza. But behind the headlines, a deeper conflict was taking shape. Iran had spent decades building a ring of proxy forces around Israel, what it called the axis of resistance. Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, Houthi rebels in Yemen, militia networks in Iraq and Syria. This network was Tehran's insurance policy, a system of deterrence built not with Iranian soldiers, but with allied armed groups willing to bleed on Iran's behalf. Throughout 2024 and into 2025, Israel began methodically dismantling that shield. Hezbollah's leadership was decimated. Hamas was degraded. Houthi infrastructure was struck repeatedly. Iranian-backed militias in Iraq and Syria were targeted. By early 2026, what had once been Iran's forward defense network was riddled with holes. The deterrence architecture that had protected Tehran for a generation was crumbling. At the center of everything was Iran's nuclear program. For years, Western governments had warned that Iran was approaching breakout capability, the point at which it could produce enough enriched uranium for a weapon within weeks.
And by next spring, at most by next summer, they will have finished the medium enrichment and move on to the final stage. From there, it's only a few months, possibly a few weeks, before they get enough enriched uranium for the first bomb.
In June 2025, the United States took the extraordinary step of launching strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities at Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan. The Trump administration described the strikes as setting Iran's program back and improving the U.S. negotiating position.
A short time ago, the U.S. military carried out massive precision strikes on the 3 key nuclear facilities in the Iranian regime: Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan. Tonight, I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success.
Diplomatic talks continued nonetheless. As recently as February 26, 2026, just 48 hours before Operation Epic Fury, the most substantive round of U.S.-Iran nuclear negotiations in years concluded in Geneva. Both sides agreed to continue talks. 48 hours later, the bombs fell anyway. Operation Epic Fury was not a reaction. It was a carefully pre-planned, pre-authorized campaign waiting for the right moment. According to Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz, Prime Minister Netanyahu had set the objective of eliminating Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei as far back as November 2025. Israel initially planned the broader operation for mid-2026, but the timing was pulled forward. U.S. and Israeli officials have said the specific date of February 28th was tied to intelligence pinpointing Khamenei's location before he could go into hiding. When that window opened, the decision was made. The plan was executed. On February 28th, approximately mid-morning Tehran time, the first wave struck. The target, Leadership House, the compound at the center of Iranian power. Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei was killed in that first wave. Dozens of senior officials died alongside him. Simultaneously, U.S. and Israeli forces struck Iranian missile stockpiles, air defense batteries, military infrastructure, and command and control networks. The attacks were designed to blind, disarm, and decapitate all at once. The Islamic Republic had lost its head, and the strikes kept coming. 900 strikes in 12 hours. By day 3, U.S. forces alone had hit approximately 200 targets. By day 7, the Israeli military claimed 2,500 strikes and 80% of Iran's air defense systems destroyed. The cost. The Center for Strategic and International Studies estimated $3.7 billion in the first 100 hours alone, roughly $891 million per day, most of it unbudgeted. Not every target was military. On the first day of strikes, a missile hit a girls' primary school in Minab, near Bandar Abbas, adjacent to a naval base. Reports indicated nearly 150 children between the ages of 7 and 12 were killed.
Missiles struck. At least 165 people were killed. Around 150 of them were children, all killed in what may be the single deadliest strike on civilians since the war began.
The U.S. acknowledged the incident and said a preliminary investigation was underway.
A Tomahawk is very generic. It's sold to other countries, but that's being investigated right now.
The images from Minab rescue workers, candles, photographs of children circled the world within hours. Iran did not collapse quietly. The IRGC launched 23 waves of retaliatory missile and drone strikes in the first week alone, targeting U.S. embassies, military installations, and oil infrastructure across the Gulf. Strikes were reported in Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Doha, Beersheba, and Kuwait City. The U.S. embassy in Kuwait was hit by an Iranian missile.
That embassy urged Americans to shelter in place, staying indoors and away from windows. U.S. officials say personnel there are also currently sheltering in place.
Iran then issued a threat with global consequences. A senior IRGC official announced it would set fire to any ship passing through the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow waterway through which roughly 20% of the world's oil supply flows every day.
و بسته شدن تنگه هرمز به دلیل شرایطی است که آمریکا و صهیونیست‌ها بر کشورهای جهان تحمیل کردند و البته پرقدرت تکرار می‌کنیم.
By March 3rd, the Iranian Red Crescent reported over 600 civilians killed. The human rights activists in Iran estimated 742 by the same date. By day 7, at least 1,332 people were dead. Hospitals were overwhelmed, and over 20,000 Americans had evacuated the region. Brent crude briefly topped $100 a barrel. A French evacuation flight was forced to turn back mid-air due to incoming missiles. Global supply chains were fracturing. The world was watching and paying. President Trump announced Operation Epic Fury on Truth Social and declared major combat operations were underway without seeking congressional authorization, without a formal war declaration, and without any public debate.
A short time ago, the United States military began major combat operations in Iran. Our objective is to defend the American people by eliminating imminent threats from the Iranian regime, a vicious group of very hard, terrible people.
The Republican-led House of Representatives voted 219 to 212 against a measure that would have required congressional authorization for the war. It was a margin of 7 votes, and it reflected deep unease even within the president's own party. Legal scholars pointed to the United Nations Charter, which prohibits the use of force against the territorial integrity of any state. Iran was not attacking the United States at the time of the strikes. It was engaged in active diplomatic negotiations. No Security Council authorization existed. Under international law, many experts argued, the strikes had no legal basis. The Trump administration did not formally respond to those arguments. The death of Khamenei triggered an immediate constitutional crisis in Iran. An interim leadership council was established on March 1st to exercise the functions of head of state, a body with no precedent in the Islamic Republic's history. The Assembly of Experts, the 88-member clerical body responsible for selecting Iran's next supreme leader, was unable to convene. Israel had destroyed the building where they were scheduled to meet on March 3rd. On March 8th, Mojtaba Khamenei, son of the slain supreme leader, was elected as his father's successor. The IRGC and Iran's top leadership pledged allegiance. President Trump publicly called Mojtaba an unacceptable choice.
You know, I was disappointed because we think it's going to lead to just more of the same problem for the country. So I was disappointed to see their choice.
He said he intended to play a direct role in selecting Iran's next leader.
I like the idea of, internal and eternal, come to think of it. But I like the idea of internal because it works well. I mean, I think we've proven that so far in Venezuela. We have a woman, Delcy, who has been, president of the country, very respected, she's doing a great job.
It was a stunning assertion of extraterritorial political power, the United States claiming a say in who rules a sovereign nation it had just bombed. The war did not stay within Iran's borders. Hezbollah resumed missile launches from Lebanon. Houthi forces continued threats against Red Sea shipping. Iranian-backed groups across Iraq and Syria went on alert. The entire Middle East was recalibrating. Oil prices remained above $100 a barrel. Global flights through the region remained disrupted. Shipping was rerouted to avoid both the Strait of Hormuz and the Red Sea, adding thousands of miles and billions of dollars to global trade. And a survey by the Israel Democracy Institute found 82% of the Israeli public supported continued military operations. The Israeli military's chief of staff said the conflict would likely continue for a long time.
Most people in Israel do support this war. That's shown in polls that were published this week that show that 80% of Israelis support the fight against Iran. They see it as an existential fight.
As of today, the war is still technically ongoing, but it is currently in a tense, highly unstable stalemate. Operation Epic Fury concluded its intensive bombing campaign on May 5th, giving way to a fragile, temporary ceasefire brokered by Pakistan. Iran's ballistic missile and drone salvos, which once choked the skies of the Middle East, have largely fallen silent. But Iran has not surrendered. Though the open bombardment has paused, the war has simply transformed into a quiet, strangling economic conflict. A dual blockade now grips the region. The United States Navy has entirely cordoned off Iran's coastlines, while Tehran effectively keeps the Strait of Hormuz closed to global energy shipping, demanding exorbitant transit tolls. Operation Epic Fury achieved its immediate, brutal military objectives. Iran's conventional air force was decimated. Its advanced air defense systems were systematically torn apart. Its supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, was killed in the opening hours. Its nuclear program has once more been shattered and set back by years. But military objectives are not the full measure of a war. They never have been. There is still the school in Manab. The 170 girls and civilians who were buried when a missile struck adjacent to the IRGC naval base, while the briefings were being prepared in Washington and Tel Aviv. There are the diplomatic tables in Islamabad, where an exhaustive 21-hour peace summit collapsed in April because neither side could agree on the nuclear question, leaving the prospect of a permanent peace unanswered.
We have been at it now for 21 hours, and we've had a number of substantive discussions with the Iranians. That's the good news. The bad news is that we have not reached an agreement, and I think that's bad news for Iran much more than it's bad news for the United States of America. So we go back to the United States having not come to an agreement. We've made very clear what our red lines are, what things we're willing to accommodate them on, and what things we're not willing to accommodate them on. And we've made that as clear as we possibly could, and they have chosen not to accept our terms.
There remains the heavy constitutional question: whether a democracy can launch a war of this scale, decapitating a foreign regime without its legislature's consent, and what it means for every future president now that the answer has turned out to be yes. And finally, there is Iran itself, wounded, destabilized, and deeply volatile. Its new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, was chosen in the shadow of American airstrikes, vowing to maintain his father's defiant path. Across the border, a separate, brutal campaign in Lebanon has left Hezbollah battered but still trading sporadic fire with Israel. The bombs are no longer falling by the hundreds every hour, but the region remains a powder keg. Washington warns its forces are locked and loaded to resume strikes, leaving millions of people across the Middle East trapped in a breathless pause, absorbing a trauma that will define their national memory for generations.